This is Classic FM.
Harry, it's really lovely to meet you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
I'm a huge admirer of your voice. You have a wonderful voice for radio and indeed anything else.
Thank you, and I've admired your voice for years myself. So,
now, you're something of a Renaissance man. You're an actor, comedian, musician, writer, director. Which of those activities gives you the most satisfaction?
Well, for years I used to say I like it all, and I still do, but about 4 years ago I had a year where I made a record with my mates in Spinal Tap, then I made a record of my own, then the three of us that comprise the core of Spinal Tap went out on an acoustic tour. So we got to about August, and I looked back and I realized every project I'd done that year so far was musical, and I'd never been happier, so I have to say music.
Which is rather good because this is Classic FM.
Although none of it was classic music.
No. I wanted to ask, what is it about the medium of radio that really appeals to you?
Couple things. It's intimacy. When I do my own radio show, there's no one between me and the audience. I don't even have the skeleton staff you have here. It's just I do my own engineering, and I do my own writing, and I play all the characters in the sketches that I do, and I just talk to the audience. So, and then it's the ability to paint pictures without a crew of 100 to have to assemble the things that people can see. They can see it in their minds perfectly clearly. So it's ergonomically efficient in terms of energy you have to put in to get a picture into people's minds.
And they do say, don't they, that the pictures on radio are the very best because it's up to your own imagination.
Yeah.
Now, you're well-known, very well-known, for all the many voices you've done on The Simpsons. I wanted to ask you, which character do you have most affinity with?
Well, I think C. Montgomery Burns, who is the owner of the local nuclear power plant and one of the world's worst bosses, although I have had worse personally, but that's another story. But I admire him mainly because he doesn't try to dilute his evil. America, a story that's on point, but Greg Daniels, who used to work at The Simpsons, went off and among his many achievements was he was the guy who adapted The Office for American television. And the New York Times once asked him, what did you have to do to adapt it for American audiences? He said, well, David Brent was such an awful character, and for American audiences, we had to have him do something good every once in a while. And C. Montgomery Burns never falls prey to that error.
And why do you think The Simpsons has been so successful?
The acting. Next question.
Of course.
What else is that? No, I'll tell you my theories. One is that the executive producer who sort of brought the project to Fox. Fox was a fledgling network at the time. No one really thought it was going to survive, so he was able to make a very advantageous deal on his part. And one of the clauses was no network creative interference with the show, which is unheard of in American television. Usually the creative, I'm air quotes every time that word is used in connection with American television, vice presidents will sit in on rehearsals and sit in on writing sessions and give their so-called notes. And the best example of a network creative note is embodied in the title of a book that came out in the early 1960s. It was by an early television writer who was a head writer on a show called My Favorite Martian. And this was a book of all these precisely stupid observations that network people had made over the years. And there was a script for My Favorite Martian, and one week a line of dialogue was circled, and the network note in the margin was, "A Martian wouldn't say that."
Oh, that's unbelievable.
So we don't have that. That's I think our key.
Well, thank goodness.
Yeah.
You went to the Radio Academy fairly recently.
Yes.
And I think you're on record as saying that you really liked Classic FM.
Yes.
Why? What are the reasons for that?
Well, I grew up loving classical music, and But with a serious asterisk, even though my father was trained as an opera singer and my wife's dad was an opera singer, I grew up with a distaste for opera. So what I love is instrumental classical music. And there's another station in town here that every time I turn it on, somebody seems to be singing. So I love turning to Classic FM and hearing symphonies and concerti and the instrumental sound. It's just the music is very much the soundtrack of my day.
And if we said to you we'd really like to play something that you particularly appreciate, what would it be?
Well, how long would it be? I mean, I'm a huge fan of Brahms's 2 piano concertos.
Those are wonderful.
And recently, I'd had this in my computer for years, and I'd heard about it, and I'd never listened to it until very recently, which was Glenn Gould's performance of number 1, the famous one where Leonard Bernstein gets up before the performance and basically apologizes for 4 minutes and saying, don't blame me, this was not my idea. And it's a remarkable performance because it's, for anybody who's familiar with the piece, it's renowned for its strange tempo. It's incredibly slow.
Yes.
But and I don't think Gould ever did it quite that slow ever again, but it gets to the heart of the problem with that piece in most renditions, which is most conductors put a lot of bombast into it.
Yes.
And this performance treats it as what I think it is, which is a purely romantic work, and it's so moving as a result. So
Yes.
if you get any of the movements from that, it's remarkable.
And do you think Montgomery Burns would appreciate that sort of music?
Well, I like something with a bit more bombast myself. As a matter of fact, all bombast all the time would be my radio format of choice.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
This is Classic FM.